Welcome to Born on the Bayou Sports, a Houston sports show made for Houstonians by Houstonians. Join Tim Costello and Scott Barzilla every week as they break down the latest in Houston Astros, Rockets, and Texans news. Tim's a former minor league broadcaster, and Scott has written 2 books on the Baseball Hall of Fame. Yeah, if Javier could get it figured out, it would make things a lot easier because he was that guy everybody was counting on this year to be a Cy Young candidate, take that big step forward and help anchor this rotation with Fromber.
Since he's come to Houston, you can look at the development of guys like Carlos Correa defensively, Jeremy Pena defensively. I mean, you can Alex Bregman's, certainly I think a better than average third baseman.
And now you're putting teams in 3rd and 8, 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. Now here comes Will Anderson. Pin back your ears, let's go. So if you're Bayou born and bred, or just like spending time in the H, sit down, relax, and stay Houston strong. Welcome back in another episode of Born on the Bayou Sports, a special edition this week as we welcome all our friends back, and we welcome a new friend into the podcast, Cody Stoots. Welcome in. We appreciate you joining us here this week.
Doing great, guys. Not related to Bob, but
no, not related to Bob, but you are one of the, I'd say, foremost experts on what's happening in Houston football, specifically with the Houston Texans. You were formerly with one of the big radio networks there in Houston, and then really just went all in on the Texans and made that your bread and butter. And so now here we are in what might be the most exciting Texans offseason we've ever had. And I think you might have made a pretty good decision on when it was time to move over to nothing but pigskin.
Yeah, I love football and I love the Houston Texans, so I love talking about them, covering them, and writing about them on the website as well as doing stuff on YouTube about them. So it's fun, man. And as you mentioned, there's been no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to this team. Starting about a year ago, right now, is when things really started to get in motion and get going for this team, and it's been full speed ahead, pedal to the metal since then.
This version of our podcast, but you were on our last podcast right around when you launched that site. I've been a proud member, since that time, and I love the content you have coming out. But for our new listeners, could you explain a little bit about what they would get if they chose to subscribe and where they can find it?
Sure, yeah. So I write about the Texans at Houston Football, www.houfootball.com, or you just throw Houston Football and Cody Stoots in the Google machine and you'll find it. And I'm a credentialed member of the Houston Texans media group, and I'm there every day. I'm at all the off-season stuff. I'm the only media member that's attended all the off-season shenanigans, so to speak, from the Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama, to the annual meetings in Orlando, Florida, and the scouting combine in between. I mean, I stay after it. I cover this team. I feel as good as anybody. I'm at everything. And people that subscribe to the site, they're going to get near daily content. Certainly during football season, it's daily and sometimes multiple times per day. Just me analyzing the team, predictions, conversation, reporting, news, notes, anything and everything that you need to be a Texans fan is going to be there on Houston Football. And I try to take care of everybody. And there's always free content on the site if you don't want to pay for it. But I think for the price of one Starbucks a month, I can take care of any Texans fan that wants to learn a little bit more about the team.
Absolutely. And before we get into what I think would be the biggest Texans news as far as, the trades they've made, I want to ask one thing specifically, because when I was credentialed for camp one year, I saw Cal McNair park his jacked up truck in a fire lane, get out, stroll in, and I was like, man, this kind of worries me as maybe the guy who inherits the team one day. And now here we are, a complete 180 from that guy, right? We have maybe between him and his wife, quite possibly the most tuned in ownership group in the NFL to the fan base, at least. I've mentioned on this podcast before, I thought the way that he handled the uniform leak could not have been better. I think he turned what could have been a PR disaster into an absolute success. So, can you talk about how you've seen him at least transform in the time you've been covering the team, and maybe since the time that Jack Easterby was outed to where we are now?
My favorite thing about Cal McNair is he's not afraid to write a check. He's not afraid to spend money on this team. There's a load of cheap owners across professional sports, and certainly even in the National Football League. But even going back to when Jack Easterby and Bill O'Brien were in charge of the team and they wanted to update and upgrade some things around the facility, like the cafeteria where the players eat, the weight room, Cal McNair was writing big checks to take care of that. He wrote big checks to get rid of Bill O'Brien, David Culley, Lovie Smith, Jack Easterby. Like it's not easy for owners to write a check to make something go away and know that they're paying out money that does not have any sort of direct effect on their team or their organization. So that's my favorite thing about Cal McNair is he's never been afraid to write a check when some owners are afraid to use their money. And then it's taken him a little while to get his foothold and to get comfortable as the decision maker or one of the decision makers for this organization. Of course, now going forward, he's going to be the principal owner of the team after that vote was unanimously approved at the annual meetings. And so I think it's been a growth process of no longer inherently just trusting whoever he trusted to make decisions, but stepping in, adding his 2 cents, giving the 2 cents of the fans through him, giving the 2 cents of his confidants, people that he trusts, people that are involved in his life, and then adding that in and sprinkling that in on top of the decision makers of the organization like Nick Caserio, D'Amico Ryans. I feel like that's been a big growth element for him. It's no longer, here, I pay you to do this, you handle it. It's, hey, I pay you to do this. What if we did this? What if we did that? There's a little bit more hands-on, and he's grown into the role a little bit more. And as you talked about, in tune with the fan base. Bob McNair brought football back to this town. Bob McNair is going to be a legend in this town forever, as he should be. I'm excited to see Cal McNair further build that relationship with this fan base and have some fun winning seasons associated with his tenure as the principal owner of this team versus some of the rougher years that have been under his watch.
All right, so to the elephant in the room. Obviously, the big move this team made last week. So, 2-part question. First part, Diggs is a guy that forced himself out of Minnesota. We could say he forced himself out of Buffalo, but at least fell out of favor. So, part A, what do you see was the situation there, and do you see that being different here? And then B, if you go back, there's been a real big partnership between D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio, and whose fingerprints do you see more on this move between Nick and D'Amico?
The second question's a great one. I'll start with that, and then we'll talk a little bit about Diggs. I feel like any big move that this team makes it had to come from someone, and then it has to get run through the 2 decision makers, which are D'Amico Ryans and Nick Caserio. So where do I believe Diggs came from? That kind of feels to me like something that Nick Caserio would bring to D'Amico Ryans. We know they tried to get Keenan Allen. The Texans did. That fell through. You bring that to D'Amico Ryans and say, hey, can your staff, can your offense use this guy, coach this guy, and handle this guy? And D'Amico Ryans, who's not going to back down from a challenge, is probably going to say, hell yeah, what's it cost? How do we make it happen? And ultimately it costs a future second-round pick, which is not some sort of great investment to get him. So any move is run through the filter of the other guy. So if Ryans comes up with an idea, it goes through Caserio. Caserio comes up with an idea, it goes through D'Amico Ryans. Who has the absolute final say? If they really truly want something, I do believe that lands and stays with D'Amico Ryans, as he's the most recently hired between the two. And obviously Nick Caserio had a little shaky start to his general manager tenure. And then as far as the Diggs commitment and going to him and adding him to this equation, I do worry about guys that are unhappy during team success. Team success is the most important thing in sports. If the team is succeeding, who cares what you individually do? Well, some guys care a lot individually about their situation. And it's not like Stefan Diggs was poorly compensated or vastly underpaid in his time with the Buffalo Bills. I mean, he got a contract extension before the 2022 season. So, I mean, and that was his second deal with Buffalo. So he was not poorly compensated. They were not a losing team. They were not a bad team. Now, you've seen some things trickle out in the past week or so about Josh Allen, maybe not the biggest Stefan Diggs fan. Stefan Diggs, maybe not the biggest Josh Allen fan. And I'm not in love with Sean McDermott as a head coach. Some of the stories that popped up over the course of this year about him and some of the, more, I don't want to say militant and have it be taken the wrong way, but it's very regimented and tight and scheduled, and there's not a lot of room to be an individual within the team, from my understanding and just reading about the Buffalo Bills. And so I feel like coming to Houston, thing I've heard time and time again from draft prospects in this draft class to opponents that played against DeMeco Ryans to the players that play for DeMeco Ryans, they love that he was an ex-player, was not that long ago that he was playing, and he can identify with the team. And when you put all those things together and you think about him as the head coach, the success the team should have, well compensated on the contract, there's almost no reason Stefan Diggs should be upset. Now, if he gets one catch in week 3 and the Texans win and he's throwing a fit, we'll know that nothing could have changed that. But I'm not as worried when I factor in the DeMeco Ryans factor, and it's hard not to like CJ Stroud. An opponent, a teammate, it's hard not to like him. The personality is infectious. He wins over teammates. I'd be shocked if you see any sort of issues from Stefan Diggs when it comes to specifically just CJ Stroud. Maybe there's targets and catches and things like that he's not happy with. But as far as CJ Stroud, the guy, CJ Stroud, the teammate, Stefan Diggs is going to love him.
I couldn't agree more with you on that point. And to make it even more obvious, they're already out in California working together right now. It's on Instagram. Nico Collins, Stefan Diggs, CJ Stroud, running routes together out there in California. And I guess that leads me to my next question. We've seen a lot of moves on the perimeter of restructuring contracts, freeing up more cap space. Even after this trade with Diggs, there's still a fair amount of cap space left, and moves have been made to free up more. Do you see the Nico Collins extension coming before the season starts? Because I do think with all the talent that's out there, there's a chance that Collins goes off. You can't double team everybody. And if he does, even a slight improvement over last year, that's going to be a really expensive contract to try and come up with, or you've got to franchise him. And, the market on franchising receivers is not cheap. So it's, it would behoove the Texans to get it done now. He said he wants to be here long term. You mean, obviously the fans want to get that done. Are you hearing that chatter down on Kirby yet that maybe Nico is going to be here for the long haul?
I'd be surprised if Nico Collins doesn't have a contract offer on his table at some point here in the offseason, and maybe even during training camp, if it takes that long into the negotiating period. Nick Caserio said at the scouting combine, hey, Nico Collins is a guy. I thought it was interesting how it came up. I asked Caserio about the franchise tag. How do you use it as a negotiating tactic? And he went on this soliloquy about the franchise tag, and I thought there was some interesting information in there. And then he randomly brings up, I'm sure we're going to be asked about a guy like Nico Collins, and that's a guy that maybe you have to factor into the future of this team. And the fact of the matter is, 3 of their top 4 wide receivers are set to be free agents: Collins, Diggs, and Noah Brown. That's 3 of your top 4 guys. They're set to be free agents. You'd like to keep one of them. You had the chance to keep Diggs with the contract that was available to you when you traded for him. You decided to alter that. So, yes, I believe Nico Collins is going to have an offer. I would think at this point, with the draft being as close as it is, this is probably a post-draft conversation. maybe a pre-training camp conversation, like when Tyus Howard got his deal as training camp got going last year. So I'd be mildly surprised if Nico Collins doesn't get a contract extension. Now, if you're Nico Collins, does it behoove you to try to play out one more year and get that mega deal? I mean, we're talking about probably another tax bracket up if he plays really well this season. But this is also a guy that prior to this past season, he's been hurt a bunch. Is a bird in the hand worth two in the bush, or I guess in Nico Collins' situation, is $20 million a year worth it versus trying to fight for $25 million a year or something of that nature. Because I would think Nico Collins, he's not making $1 less than Calvin Ridley. I mean, he's every bit the wide receiver that Calvin Ridley is right now and better. So he's not making $1 less, and Ridley got a nice contract from the Titans, about $92 million over 4. So there's not $1 less that he should take in a contract extension. So it's going to be expensive, but to your point, if they wait, it gets even more expensive. Certainly with a franchise tag or with a an extension after 2 really good seasons with the Texans.
So before we look forward, which is a lot to look forward to, and you can include the Diggs acquisition in this question, but what is the one move that the Texans made this offseason that made you jump on the table and say, let's frickin' go?
Danielle Hunter. I mean, Danielle Hunter is an absolute monster. Tied for the league lead in tackles for a loss last year, a double-digit sack guy every season that he's been healthy and played all the games. And it's not often that you see a team set a franchise sack record and then swap out 3 of the 4 starting defensive linemen, because Jonathan Grenard, Sheldon Rankins, and Malik Collins are gone. Only Will Anderson remains as a starter from last year. And most of us believe they're going to be better on the defensive line. And Danielle Hunter is a huge part of that. That came day 2 of free agency after a slower day 1 than most expected or wanted. But yeah, Danielle Hunter is, I mean, he's not ever, to me, played on a team that's going to have the amount of potential around him that he's going to have. And so I'm very excited about what he can bring to the table for this team and for 2024 and 2025. And then after that, you have the conversation about, having him stick around a little bit longer, or, can Will Anderson take it to the next level? And maybe you don't feel like you have to keep Danielle Hunter, but that's a future conversation. Hunter, to me, is the move that just got me going, wow, they're really going for it. They're really diving in on this. And it's a short-term and long-term benefit to this team having Hunter. It's not like that's some one-year prove-it deal. I mean, they got him for 2 no matter what. And then they'll obviously have the chance to extend him after that. But that's the move to me that just jumps off the page at their offseason.
No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think when you look at some of the moves they made in the secondary, they didn't go get a top-tier guy, right? They got some guys who maybe have high ceilings, who haven't quite reached that potential yet, or third, fourth cornerback on the roster type guys. And when you're banking on Stingley and those other cornerbacks to make plays, you need to bring the heat, right? You've got to get after the quarterback. These aren't the kind of defensive backs who are going to lock down for 6, 7, 8 seconds. They'll give you 3 or 4, and I think that's the way the Texans have built this team up. But that kind of leads us to the NFL draft, right? Because we're in a position where the Texans traded out of the first round. They used that collateral to go get Diggs. But now they've got 2 second-round picks this year. One of the guys a lot of people thought the Texans would be interested in just got arrested for a DUI or DWI. I'm not sure which one, but Sweat, the defensive tackle from University of Texas. Where does that, how does that change things in your opinion in the Texans draft board? Do you think they look elsewhere for a defensive tackle in that early second round, or do they just go best player available? I feel like there's not a ton of holes on this roster, but there are, some areas maybe you'd like to think long-term at as well.
You definitely got to be realistic about what a second-round pick is going to be. You would love for both these second-rounders, the Texans, as we talk about it, have 42 and 59 in the second round. You love for both those guys to come in and be starters. That's just not realistic for second-rounders, and that's not realistic for where this team is right now, the way it's constructed, and some of the investments that they have made. I do feel like best player available is the likely scenario, with maybe an exception to that rule if a certain player at a certain position that they love is there. Look, Nick Caserio has been no stranger on day 2 of the NFL draft, going and specifically getting exactly who he wants. In his time as the GM, he's traded for and drafted on day 2 of the NFL draft Nico Collins, Christian Harris, Tank Dell, Juice Scruggs, and John Mechie. I think it's 7 or 8 total picks in that time in the second and third round, and he's traded up for 5 of those players. So he clearly has guys that he likes when they get close on the draft board, and he doesn't want those guys to go away. But you got to be realistic. If those players they pick in the second round are immediate impact guys with something that they do, okay? If you're a wide receiver, are you a unique talent compared to what they already have? If you're a corner, do you have something that these other corners don't have? Maybe it's speed or the ability to play man coverage. If you're a defensive tackle, do you bring something to the table that maybe only 1 or 2 other defensive tackles bring to the table? On and on and on. So you want a discernible skill right away. As far as T'Vondre Sweat goes, I mean, he was a questionable fit prior to this. The DWI, the 25% more than the legal limit. He checked in at over 0.10. So, he had a pretty healthy amount of booze in him. And, poor judgment by him. He gets caught. That's something he's got to deal with. My questions weren't necessarily about that incident, but if this guy's a guy that has weight problems and he's drinking and partying all the time, well, maybe that's why you have weight problems. Like if T'Vondre Sweat could be 340 and a little bit even more of an athletic freak than he already is if he stopped drinking, like that's something that I would want to know about that prospect. I mean, he's going to be a 360-pound player in the NFL. I just don't see how he's going to get lower if he doesn't change something drastically. And at that point, like he's telling teams, Dane Brugler tweeted this. He's been telling teams, yeah, I partied a little bit when I was younger, when I first got to UT, but that's done now. And then this happens. So he was already a questionable scheme fit because of what DeMeco Ryans likes. This probably doesn't help him. Obviously, it gets to the point where the talent outweighs the questions. So third, fourth round, somebody's going to take that swing. Maybe it's the Texans. Maybe it's not. But there's guys in the defensive tackle spot that are worth the investment that fit a bit better than T'Vondre Sweat. Braden Fisk from Florida State is probably the name that comes to mind the most. I just see you see violence when he plays. Really freaky athlete, tested well at the combine, had a really impressive Senior Bowl in Mobile, Alabama. I mean, that's a guy that you would draft. Him as well as Chris Jenkins, whose father was the NFL defensive tackle of the same name. Both of those guys fit a little bit better than T'Vondre Sweat does. But yeah, that second round pick, you want somebody who can contribute, but they don't have to be a starter in 2024. Or if they're going to be a starter, they don't have to be a starter right away in 2024. You just need some sort of skill that's useful on day one. It's an old Bill Parcells thing. What can you do for me on the football field? Well, if the guy's an ace punt returner and he's got top end speed that the rest of the roster doesn't have a wide receiver, then he can do something for you day one. What can you do for me day one? That's the big question the Texans got to answer when they draft these guys in the second round.
So looking further, down the draft, because certainly I don't think this would be a second round priority, but Dameon Pierce was officially DAL in yards per carry for qualified backs this last year. Number one, do you see him bouncing back? And if not, do you see them investing a middle round pick on a running back?
I'd love to see Dameon Pierce bounce back, because if you had Joe Mixon with Dameon Pierce playing well, that's a really solid 1-2 punch. You can't bet on Dameon Pierce bouncing back, though. You cannot operate like that is going to happen if you're the Houston Texans. If it happens, that's a big bonus for you. It's a big positive for you. This is among the weirdest running back classes of the past few seasons. I could see multiple guys going in the second round. I could see one guy come off the board in the second round, and then the next time we see a running back, it's something like the late third or the fourth. It's a very weird position this year. There's no consensus number one. There's a different style and flavor for whatever you want. There's do-it-all backs. There's power backs. There's catch the ball out of the backfield backs. There's a little bit of everything. So I don't believe Pierce can bounce back. I don't know that an offseason just totally has him figure this thing out. He's going to get the opportunity, certainly. But you need to have a backup plan. You need to plan for Dameon Pierce not bouncing back. So maybe that's a rookie in the draft. I think the names that really jump off the page from where they should go and how they fit the Texans is a guy like Braylon Allen from Wisconsin. He's just a tough-nosed, between the tackles runner, a lot of success at Wisconsin. Talked about how he relishes pass blocking from the running back spot, which is some of the buzz conversation that's going to get teams excited about him. And he's just 20 years old too. So, he's not as old as some of these other prospects. The other guy that I feel like fits real well is Will Shipley from Clemson. He can run every route that you would ask a running back to run. And he's got a lot of between the tackles success, not as much outside success. So maybe that's a little bit of a question mark when it comes to the Texans, but he can catch the ball out of the backfield. And the player I like the most at the running back spot is Marshawn Lloyd. He's actually got a little Dameon Pierce to him in that he didn't carry the ball a ton in college, but when he did touch the ball, he was electric. I think Lloyd averaged over 7 yards per carry when he touched the ball at USC this past year, 7 yards a touch when he touched the ball at USC. So a little bit of dynamic explosiveness. He caught the ball well in Mobile, which was a question that people wanted to see about his game. He could be the first back off the board. He could be the seventh back off the board. Again, this is a very weird running back class. But, yes, they should seriously invest in options behind Joe Mixon, be it a running back or additional veterans at the end of the draft if they don't draft one.
One of the interesting visits that I saw lined up the Texans had was Spencer Rattler. This is a guy who, at some point, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, people thought might be a number 1 overall pick of this draft. He was a top recruit coming out of high school, going to OU to play for Lincoln Riley. Now, we're looking at possibly like a day 3 guy. I really like the idea of bringing someone like that in now to learn this system, to be a backup quarterback for CJ Stroud, because one of the things that drives me crazy, and we did this when Watson was here too, is when you have a backup quarterback that plays a completely different style of football than your starter does, and you completely have to change the offense. There was one year we went out and got A.J. McCarron to back up Deshaun Watson. Well, who has 2 completely different styles are A.J. McCarron and Deshaun Watson. I think the Baltimore Ravens have a fantastic plan when Lamar Jackson goes down. They've got a guy who has a similar skill set and can do similar things. The Texans, possibly if you go get a guy like Rattler, he is obviously not C.J. Stroud, but he has a lot of the same athletic abilities. He's mobile. He can do different things in the pocket. He can manipulate the defense with his legs. He can throw on the run. I like the idea of thinking forward, developing a backup quarterback, having a backup plan, and it's just Caserio, I think, doing a great job.
Your 2 backups as well are set to be free agents at the end of the season. So Davis Mills and Case Keenum both in the last year of their contract, and if you go into an offseason a year from now with no backup quarterback on the roster, you don't have time to retroactively add some of that experience that you're talking about. I actually talked about this recently. It's not the worst idea to have, say, CJ Stroud, Case Keenum, and a rookie or a priority undrafted free agent for the very reason that you talked about. Get used to it, have zero expectation about playing, and him be the QB2 or QB3 with another veteran coming in 2025. I like the way the room is built. If they want to keep it the same in 2024, I'd certainly understand it. As CJ Stroud plays more, the necessity for a veteran to be around him will go down. Like the second year of Case Keenum makes a lot of sense. The first year it was a no-brainer to have a guy like Keenum in the room. Just for getting CJ Stroud acclimated, having him be the liaison between team and quarterback. It made a ton of sense. As Stroud plays, matures, and plays better, the necessity for guys like Keenum goes down. And so then it's like, okay, well, who do you have back there? Well, you're not going to re-sign Davis Mills. I wouldn't anticipate that Davis Mills would want to re-sign here. So if you wanted to use one of those draft picks, Rattler probably not the type of guy I would go for, just because it costs to pick the. I'm not prioritizing it, but I'm not ignoring it. So 9 selections. You got a couple of picks in the 6th round, couple of picks in the 7th round. You want to take a swing at somebody and have that guy in here, and sort of anoint him as QB3 with Keenum being QB2 and CJ Stroud being QB1. I certainly would be fine with that, and I certainly see how that makes sense. And look, if the guy plays well enough, say in 2 years, maybe you can flip him for a pick and start that whole process over. That's sort of the pipe dream when you have a good backup quarterback, is you turn him into a draft pick, down the road. Maybe that's something the Texans could think about doing.
Yeah, I wrote an article on Battle Red Blog that got, panned by a lot of the fans, and I advocated actually signing Ryan Tannehill. And my reasoning is that if you look at the last 2 years, I think this last year, 8 quarterbacks played 17 games. And the season before that, 9 played 17 games out of 32 teams. And we saw Stroud miss 2 games due to concussion protocol. Obviously, Davis Mills was the backup throughout most of the season until it came time to start. And then they started Case Keenum. And he showed, I don't know that he can physically make all the throws anymore.
They can't.
I think he is a great, like an extra coach on the field. I love him in that. But as you pointed out, Stroud's got experience now. When I'm thinking of the one thing that can derail this team that has Super Bowl aspirations is, God forbid, what happens if Stroud goes down.
Mm-hmm.
Because I just don't know that either of the guys that you have there are capable of winning multiple games for this team.
My standard is always, hey, if my guy's down for 2 weeks, can my backup win one of those 2 games? If my guy's down for a month, can my backup win 2 of the 4 games that my team's going to play? I don't believe Case Keenum can do that. I don't. And the Titans game, it was a little bit of luck and at a bad football team. We saw what happened when Keenum went up against a good football team the following week in the Cleveland Browns. It didn't look good. So if Keenum's that guy at the backup spot, you got to hope for one of those 8 or 9 quarterbacks that plays all the snaps to be CJ Stroud. And I'm with you. Look, it's not a position to be ignored. I just don't know with some of the other things that you want to accomplish that you're going to massively prioritize it beyond the way that they've done it now. And look, if CJ Stroud goes down for any real length of time, you're sunk in the water. Doesn't matter who your backup is, even if it is Ryan Tannehill. But just that, I always use that standard of, hey, 4 games, can my backup, gut it out through 2 wins in those 4 games? Keenum doesn't feel like he could. So you just hope that you don't get Case Keenum in there very often in 2024 if he is the backup.
I was going to say, isn't one of the 7th rounders Mr. Irrelevant? The last 7th rounder?
The last pick is always Mr. Irrelevant. Brock Purdy.
I know, but I'm saying the Texans, I think their last 7th rounder is the last pick in the draft, I want to say.
I don't think so. I think some picks got added on there at the back.
Oh, compensatory picks?
Yeah, the Jets got some comp picks. Yeah, the Jets had the final 2 selections in this draft.
I wouldn't mind throwing a flyer out there at somebody in the 7th round because, what are the chances of a 7th rounder really being an impact player anyway?
Yeah, look,
ask Brock Purdy.
Exactly.
I think that's the perfect example for why you do it, why you have that guy with something to him, sitting there and hanging out on the depth chart is in case they turn into Brock Purdy. Like, I think that's what you hope when you spend a 7th round pick on a quarterback. And if it doesn't end up being Brock Purdy, then maybe it ends up being just a guy that you can trust to go out there week in, week out, help your quarterback, help your defense get better because he's running scout team. Like, you can impact the game without playing on Sundays.
Guys like Charlie Whitehurst had a long career in the NFL just holding a clipboard, right?
Yeah. Like, if you get an elite clipboard holder with that 7th round pick, like that's still a worthwhile investment too.
Well, I guess one of my next questions, we'll move away from the draft. As a media member, you obviously were privy to the first look at some of these new uniforms. Obviously, the white ones have been released already. I don't want you to get in trouble for saying anything you shouldn't say, but I guess what were your initial thoughts just when you saw the uniforms? Were you blown away? Were you kind of just like, hey, take my money. I want that one. What was your vibe in the room? What was the thoughts?
Yeah, so I'll primarily talk about the one that has been public.
Okay.
And then I'll kind of talk a little bit more, as much as I can, about the other ones, as you mentioned, without revealing anything or getting myself or anybody in trouble. I believe, looking at them, that what you saw is going to be one of the two jerseys that is not the favorite. I think there will be two favorites, and I think there will be two, oh, okay. And I feel like that the jersey that became public, that the Texans sent the teaser image with Nico Collins and Tank Dell, is one of the, oh, okay. The first time I saw the jerseys, I would tell you that it took me a second to take it in. I also would say that where I saw them and how I saw them is nowhere close to the way they're going to look on a football field. So I am excited to see what all this looks like in, noon Sunday light at NRG Stadium. So I think that's going to change the way things appear. What I do know about the way that they've approached this, I feel like, yes, jerseys and the things like that, people are going to be excited about them. People may purchase those. I believe some of I call it, like the other gear, like the orbit gear. So if the new jerseys are the planets, the stuff that's in orbit, hats, T-shirts, polos, they're going to have some really, really snazzy stuff.
Yeah.
With that. And
Texas hat game has always been lacking, I feel like. Our hat game has been weak for the most part.
They're going to have the opportunity to put some really fun stuff together. And look, obviously a lot of people buy jerseys. Far more people buy stuff that aren't jerseys. And I feel like a lot of that stuff is going to look really, really nice. They're going to have some really, really fun mixing and matching that is available. In particular, I think there's going to be one element that once they just put it on a polo, people will buy 4 or 5 different polos. Like it's going to look really nice. So I'm excited to see fans get to see it. I think the full-blown, you see everything reveal is, draft week, I think on that Tuesday.
Yeah.
There's going to be some sort of build up to that where you're going to kind of be able to estimate and guess what some of the elements will look like. I'd be real surprised if most people aren't happy with what they've done. You can't please everybody. That's impossible.
Yeah, for sure.
Some people wanted it, torn down, start something new from square one. Some people didn't want a lot of change. Everybody can be their own judge as to what exactly they ultimately landed on. As far as the one that we saw, I mean, I thought it was pretty snazzy.
Yeah.
A lot of elements that were present in the picture. There's some elements that are not present in the picture that I would tell people are still yet to be revealed about that particular jersey and style. So I'm excited for the fans to see it. It's going to be one of, I mean, when was the last time, and this since the inception, there's only been one other, the last new thing was a battle red, or the last new thing was the color rush jerseys. And that was only a slight change.
Yeah.
A little bit more than a slight change. This time it's fun and exciting. And again, people buy jerseys, people buy way more of the other stuff. And I feel like the other stuff is going to be selling like hotcakes.
I couldn't agree more with you. I mean, I think the white jersey, is it the favorite jersey I've ever had? No, but I don't even love our current white jersey, right? Like, I think it's okay, but the lettering looks good. I think it looks newer, it looks sleeker, it looks more modern. My one question, I have to know if anybody's made any developments in the case of A, who the hell was the guy in the picture, and B, where was it taken? Because that looks like like the basement
It
of
was a hostage. It was
like
a
a high
hostage
school
voting.
football stadium basement where you like run
He's
through
holding
the
up the
tunnel.
newspaper with the day's date, saying send $5 million.
How did they
He's
get
gonna
it
die.
out? Like, how did they get? Did someone sneak a jersey down their pants and then like throw it over some high school pads?
That's so the person that you saw in the leaked picture is one of the models they had modeling the jersey.
Okay.
I think you can put,
Yeah.
without me saying too much, I think you can put 2 and 2 together on how something like that gets out.
Sure.
It looks in the preview, it looked better on the mannequins than it did on the models, and obviously it looks way better on Tank Dell and Nico Collins in that teaser image. And I've spoken to somebody who's seen other Texans players in the uniforms, and they made the comment it looks even better on some of the different positions than just wide receiver as well. So
yeah, that looks like one of those ones. If you're jacked, that uniform's gonna look great on like a Daniil Hunter or on Will Anderson. They're gonna look fantastic in that.
I love it, but I love what you said though about the other gear, because I mean I can't wear a jersey to school,
right.
But I can wear polos. I mean I can wear that every day, and so that's something I'm looking forward to seeing. I guess also staying away from the draft. Tim was referencing earlier with rearranging some contracts and things like that. So I like to play my magic bullet game. So if you could pick one more guy that's available on the open market right now, like who would your guy be?
Oh, it's easy. That's easy for me. It's Justin Simmons. He's been fantastic in Denver for the past few seasons. Former co-leader in interceptions, do it all safety, all pro potential. Each season he goes out there, and I'm surprised he's not on a football team right now. I mean, he is to me a potential game changer for a team that's already put together a good defense. Like if you're a good defense and you add him to the equation, you can, like, he makes you even better. He's a chess piece that you can play around with. That'd be the guy for me. And I like Jimmy Ward and I like Jalen Petrie, to an extent. Simmons is in a class above those guys. You got to remember, he was cut in Denver not for performance. He was cut in Denver because they ran out of money this offseason because they had to jettison Russell Wilson and get rid of him. So Simmons would be on the Broncos if the contract hadn't been so big. So with that, why is he not signed? Maybe it's money. Maybe it's the opportunity. Maybe he doesn't want to go through some of the offseason hoopla. Maybe he hasn't realized that the safety market's a bit depressed. And so, yeah, Simmons is the guy for me that if they could throw a few more bucks at this roster, and you think about this too, the Texans seem to like their top 3 safeties. Their top 3 guys are Jalen Petrie, Jimmy Ward, and Eric Murray. And Eric Murray, if you remember last year before he got hurt, he played a lot. He played a lot for this team. They used him in a lot of different ways. They kind of used him as a chess piece to move him and the other safeties around. If you could make him the 4th safety, Ward and Petrie as rotating in with Simmons, like your depth at safety all of a sudden gets really interesting and really nice. But yeah, Justin Simmons is the guy for me.
See, I guess, I know Xavier Howard mentioned that he wanted to come to Houston. And I know we talked about having those guys that have underperformed at corner so far. So I wonder if they might look at a guy like him if his price were to come down.
I don't know if the price is high right now. So take this for what you want. Xavier Howard has the comments about, I want to play for the Houston Texans. And I'm paraphrasing there, but he basically said, he'd like to play for the Texans. I asked D'Amico Ryans at the annual meetings, I said, what did it feel like this offseason to have people want to come play for the Texans? And when you hear somebody say, I want to play for the Texans publicly, how does that make you feel? He's like, a lot of guys may want to play with us, but they have to fit what we do. And at that point, to me, really the only public comment about I want to play for the Texans is Xavier Howard. And so they have to fit. Now that I may be reaching a little bit, but if he fit, he'd be in. It seems like he doesn't fit for some reason. Maybe it's maybe the Texans feel like he has to start. Maybe they feel like he's only a short-term solution because in a perfect world, one of these two young guys that's a former top 10 pick in Jeff Okudah and CJ Henderson, one of those two guys works out and you keep him opposite Derek Stingley for a couple of seasons. Like that'd be a perfect world scenario with those cornerbacks is one of those young guys works out. Xavier Howard's got 1-2 more years before, Father Time catches up to him. So these young guys, and both in their mid-20s, they work out, that's 5-6 years that those guys could play for you.
That's true.
So taking it down that route and taking it down the potential route, maybe that's why the Texans opted for the younger guys versus Howard.
No, that certainly makes a lot of sense. I mean, and when you look at, I guess, the approach that New England has, and when you look at the approach that even San Francisco has, they are able to find guys that couldn't quite cut the mustard elsewhere and get them into their system because they're looking for guys that have certain traits, right? When it was, a corner, they want guys with long arms and they can jam at the line of scrimmage and force guys to the sideline, or whether it be New England, maybe, hey, we want a guy who can sit in zone coverage and do this specific thing because we've got linebackers who can cover and we've got safeties who can do this. And so, when you look at the two philosophies that D'Amico comes from and that Nick Caserio comes from, some of these moves make a lot of sense, right? When you they're hunting with a shotgun, and they're not going for big game hunting where you've got to have a precision shot. They're throwing pellets up in the air and they're trying to clip as many wings as they possibly can because they know that if we get enough guys who fit this mold works in the NFL. I've seen 6'3" long arm quarterback be able to do this over and over again. All I need this guy to do is, as you said, contribute in this one way. I need him to force everything to the middle of the field where I've got two fantastic coverage linebackers over the middle to shut shit down. I've got Stingley on the other side. I've got two good safeties. I just need this second corner to do this one thing really, really well. And I think that's kind of the guy or the MO that they were looking for in free agency, knowing that we're going to get a couple big names. We're going to add to the offense. But, hey, we don't have to go spend $30 million on a corner. We can find a second corner who does these two or three things really, really well.
And the veteran corners got expensive fast. I mean, Awuzie, the former Cowboy and Bengal, who I thought the Texans maybe should chase. I mean, he ended up making over $10 million a year, I think, when it was all said and done. And the old guys got expensive fast. They opted for the young, cheap guys, and if they can rebuild those. And look, I'd be surprised if they don't have one of those two guys hit to the level where you can at least run them out there every week opposite Derek Stingley. Where I get a little concerned is all three of the top corners, Stingley on the outside and then Henderson and Okudah fighting for the other outside spot. They've all got some injury issues and some dependability issues. So I do worry a little bit about depth. But even then, the Texans have brought in a couple of different depth pieces here and there. I mean, they've got a backup slot guy if Desmond King has to bump outside. So they've done a pretty good job giving themselves options. Now it's up to the coaching staff and the front seven to make those guys right on a consistent basis.
Yeah, and it's true. And you're mentioning the older corners. It looks like Steven Nelson kind of priced himself out of the market because he hasn't found a home yet. And he had a stronger year last year. Of course, he got burned some too. I mean, that one game against Cleveland in the regular season was ugly. But, he led the team in interceptions as well. So, you would have thought he would have found a home at some point.
Yeah, he to me played really well early on. Injuries caught up to him. There's just not a big market at the price that he seems to want for a guy of his age and capabilities. I'll tell you what, though, whenever he signs, and it's going to be for less than he wanted, whenever he signs, someone's getting a good bargain if he stays healthy because he's still got a little juice left to him. He's still got a little bit of good football left in him. It just didn't make sense for the Texans, and I feel like they see the potential of one of these young guys hitting higher than that of what Steven Nelson could have brought to the table in 2024.
I know we're kind of running up against it for you anyway. Do you have anything else, Tim? Because I was going to let him have an honorary scumbag.
No, I was gonna say we normally do tips of the caps now, and then we do scumbags. I was
Yeah.
gonna give you a chance to give somebody a tip of the cap before we move into the scumbags as well.
All right, so my tip is somebody that I'm like, I like. They did a great job. They deserve this. And then my scumbag is somebody, could be anybody that's done something, terrible.
Yeah.
Correct?
Absolutely.
All right. Okay. I got a fun tip of the cap for you. Seth Martinez. He has been called upon in some unfavorable positions to start this season, and really over the past year plus that he's been with this Astros team. And I feel like he's pretty damn reliable. So I'm gonna give my tip of the cap to long relief man, never a starter, never a key reliever, but save us, Seth Martinez. I'm gonna give my tip of the cap to him. I feel like I stole one from somebody.
Absolutely, you did, and it's okay. So Scott, I'm gonna let you go second while I reconvene. As you and I had texted last night, and I said I'm giving Seth Martinez my tip of the cap. So Scott, why don't you go ahead and go second while I reconvene here?
Actually, I was going to go Ronel Blanco. 30-year-old, never just kind of bounced around, and he is the AL Player of the Week officially. No hitter in his first start, earliest no hitter in a season in MLB history, and 15 no hit innings before finally giving up a hit. So tip of the cap to him. He definitely saved our bacon in the first 10 games.
He's sort of the epitome of the phrase, how can you not be romantic about baseball? I mean,
Absolutely.
Typically guys from his situation are signed when they're 14, 15, 16. They have all this training. They get up. He signs in his early 20s. He battles and claws his way through various types of professional baseball and then finds, that incredible start to the season and an opportunity that he wasn't even really supposed to have because of injuries. And it seems like, unfortunately for the Astros now, he's going to keep that spot for a little while. Or maybe fortunately, because he's been one of the best pitchers in baseball through the first couple of starts. So that's one of those peak, how can you not be romantic about baseball moments when you think about Blanco and his story and things like that.
Absolutely. And then, to find out the day that you gave birth to your child is the day that you find out you're making the team out of spring training. Could not be happier from him. I'm going to give a tip of the cap to Robert Ford. I have an immense respect for the job that Robert does, having, number one, done that job at a minor league level myself. But number two, you took over a chair that was filled by a Hall of Famer for a long time. Milo Hamilton is one of the greats. I've really started to think of Milo as the Forrest Gump of Major League Baseball. Like, he just kept popping up in some of the game's biggest and most historical situations. Just all of a sudden, hey, here's Milo. And that's the guy who people associate with Houston baseball. He was in the Hall of Fame before any Houston player was in the Hall of Fame. Milo Hamilton was there. And to come in and to not only get a chance to call 7 no-hitters as a broadcaster is unbelievable. But he does it with a touch of class and a bit of flair, and just he does it his own way. He's never tried to be Milo. He's never tried to be anybody but Robert Ford. And as someone who lives out of market, I literally pay $20 every single year just to be able to listen to Robert Ford in my car because I love listening to him as I drive around. There's nothing like baseball on the radio. And again, I may be a homer, but I really feel like here in Houston, we've got one of the best in Robert. And Steve Sparks is a great color guy. Just knows a lot of great humor and knows how to use them. And a secondary tip to the TV team as well. Callis and Blummer both do a fantastic job. Blummer as well, one of the more helpful people in the world for young broadcasters. When I was in the minor leagues, he's someone I literally was able to reach out to, pick his brain, and felt like he helped me get better. So overall, tip of the cap to the Astros broadcast team, but especially Mr. Robert Ford. Well, it's that quick time. We've got a new transition. I'm going to hit it as these people have offended Tim and Scott and Cody this week, and they need to be recognized as scumbags of the week. Cody, we'll give you the honorary first scumbag this week?
So I love the NFL draft, and it's one of my favorite things. It's my favorite thing of the offseason. I'm a huge college football fan. I'm lucky enough to be a Heisman Trophy voter. So the NFL draft gets to mold my love for Saturdays with my love for Sundays. And so I love the draft, and I probably at sometimes love it too much. But the who cares guy that gets in the mentions or the comments of any conversation about a draft pick is so annoying to me. So it's not necessarily a specific, like one named person, but the who cares about the draft guy. Like it's not a giant 3-day production with 2 primetime, night cycles occupied. Like it's not one of the most important aspects of the offseason where you find cost controlled talent for your team. But who cares about the draft guy? He gets the nod this week. And sorry, buddy, we're talking about the draft for the next month, so get used to it.
Well, Scott, I think you and I are going to team up here as we're singling out an honorary scumbag as Guy. We're going to go guy who vetoes trade in fantasy baseball league because he's jealous of what is a great trade for 2 teams. I'm playing fantasy ball for the first time in a long time. Scott invites me in. I sent him a text. I said, Scott, I want Jose Altuve. I'm willing to part with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Build yourself a package around him. Scott built the fucking package. And these meathead whatever losers vetoed 2 separate fucking versions of this trade. What are you doing with your life that you're vetoing fantasy fucking baseball trades? Get the hell out of here.
Yeah, I'm going to second that one. But my scumbag for the week is going to be a tandem effort. I'm going to go with one of our favorite whipping boys, Manfred. But mainly the Oakland A's and Mad Dog Russo, I was listening to on my XM. It just floors me. There was a caller that called in who's like, and he says, let me explain to you why Oakland is not supporting the A's. And he says, because they don't support their team financially. And so Mad Dog Russo goes, well, Manfred came to me and he assured me that they're spending the revenue sharing dollars on the team. I'm like, yeah, because I'm going to trust Manfred any further than I can throw that guy. And with my bad knee, I shouldn't be throwing anybody. I mean, they're spending $60 million on their team this year. That is $20 million less than the 29th ranked team. So now what are those people doing? We can't stay in Oakland because Oakland's not going to give us a lease because they shouldn't when you've already announced you're moving to Vegas. So they're going to go to Sacramento. They're going to play in a AAA stadium. It's going to seat maybe 20,000 people. And they're going to do this for 3 years. It's not a year deal where we're just going to get through. They're going to do this for 3 years. Just move to Vegas. Now, I don't know. I know how old Tim is. I don't know how old you are, Cody, but I was in college when the Oilers announced that they were leaving and moving to Tennessee. And the 2 years that they were here after they made their announcement were the longest 2 years. It was longer than having no football at all. Because having your team in town, knowing they're not going to be there, why do I care? And there were routinely 15, 20,000 people, if you can imagine, at an Oilers game at that time. I mean, if you can imagine crowds that small for an NFL game.
Yeah.
Because they announced 2 years before they left for Nashville. So the A's are doing the same thing. They've already announced they're moving to Vegas. They don't have a stadium ready. It's going to take them 4 years to build it, which it should be a 2-year job. That's kind of a different story. So they're going to go to Sacramento and play in a AAA stadium. That is just a complete joke.
I mean, let's be honest. They couldn't fill a fucking AAA stadium. Like, I am with the Oakland A's fans on this, right? Like, let's look at now Miami Marlins was Florida Marlins. You win 2 World Series championships, then gut the fucking roster both times, and then you sit there and wonder why no one's coming to my brand new expensive ass ballpark with a really weird mural in center field. Like, when you consistently get rid of your high priced talent because you refuse to sign them long term, what do you expect from your fan base? You have shown zero loyalty to the players. You've shown zero loyalty to the fans. And it's not just, this is new. I'm sorry we lost Matt Chapman and Matt Olson. Like, no. You lost fucking McGuire. You lost Canseco. You lost Ricky Henderson. You lost Reggie Jackson. You lost Barry Zito. You lost Dan Herron. You lost Rich Harden. You lost Miguel Tejada. You've lost every fucking piece of talent that has ever put on those god-awful green and gold uniforms. But yet somehow, some way, people have still shown up to your fucking stadium for 30 years. And now here you are asking for tax dollars to build a new stadium. You didn't get that. And by the way, that's a separate... Billionaires shouldn't get fucking tax dollars, okay? You're a billionaire. Build your own fucking stadium. But again, you've been nothing but a liar and a cheat. And I guarantee you the Christmas bonuses for the Oakland A's front office are going to be fat this year. With all that revenue sharing and when I say front office, I mean John Fisher's going to give himself a really, really nice yacht for Christmas because no one else ain't getting shit.
Well, but see, here's the thing. And baseball has a 150-year history of owners lying. So you don't get the benefit of the doubt. They don't open their books. I don't know if you saw this, Cody, but I think this was a couple of years ago where the Braves accidentally released their financials.
Yeah.
Where there was like $500 or $600 million in revenues, and they're not even spending $200 million on their payroll. I mean, you look at the NFL, you look at the NBA. I mean, their collective bargaining agreement is right there in front of God and everybody. They're spending roughly 50% on player salaries. I mean, that's what the salary caps are based on. In the NFL, I mean, it's a formula. It's like we made this X amount of dollars, so therefore the salary cap goes up to this. In baseball, they're not releasing their books, so they could be, making any, amount of revenue that we don't know about. I mean, Drayton McClain 3 years in a row before they built Minute Maid Park said like, "Oh, I need 2 million fans to break even." Mm-hmm. He got 2 million fans. "Oh no, I need 2.2 million." He got 2.2. No, I need 2.4. Oh, well, no, I need a new stadium now. I mean, it was just a complete bunch of horseshit. And so if you're the commissioner of baseball and you're going to come in and say, "Oh, well, I guarantee you he's spending the revenue sharing dollars." Yeah, show me. And if he's investing in scouting, that's great, but show me. Don't just tell me because I don't see it because you don't show the books.
For sure. Yeah, and they're going to be just the A's, not the Sacramento A's. There's going to be the A's and the Athletics playing in Sacramento. That'll be fantastic, I'm sure.
Honestly, though, I'm probably maybe want to take a trip out for the Astros out there because, like, if we're being honest, I love minor league baseball stadiums. There is no better place to watch just a baseball game than a minor league stadium because you are up on the action. It is intimate. It is fantastic. Knowing what I know, that my wife has family out there, and she loves going to that area, and the Astros will go there for 3 years, that might be a great place to go watch an Astros game.
You get plenty of tickets.
Hopefully they leave the drums in Oakland.
Yeah. I'm sure we could overpower them with the 15 traveling
Astros
fans.
Might even have a better sewage system in their clubhouses.
You never know. But hey, that's going to be it for us here this week. We appreciate Cody coming on and joining us, talking a little Texans. Cody, again, just remind everybody, where can they find you and how do they join your subscriber network?
Yeah, sure. Cody Stoots on YouTube, CODYSTOOTS, or on Twitter at Cody_Stoots, as well as just, throw it in the Google machine. Cody Stoots, Houston football. You'll find the site. There's free content on there. And then there's also the paid content, and I'll make it worth your money. I always say that to the folks. I'll make it worth your money. And if not, it's only a 1 month commitment if you don't like it, and I'll bid you farewell and you miss out on all the fun stuff we put together on the site. But there's always free stuff for the folks that want to get on there free. And then there's, of course, the paid content as well. And then YouTube is fantastic as well. I feel like we do a lot of fun stuff on YouTube and have a lot of fun there. So appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, I've been a happy subscriber for a year, and it's well worth every penny.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you.
All right, Cody. Well, we appreciate you joining us. We encourage everyone to pound our subscribe button, to like that Facebook page. to stay on top of the Born on the Bayou Sports movement as we continue to grow this thing. And again, putting more and more into the production value, bringing on a guest, upgrading the computer CPU. We're doing it all here over in the command station, all for the fans. So we appreciate everybody who joined us this week. Be sure to check out Cody's site, as again, this might have been the most exciting Texans offseason we've had so far. Perfect time to get in there, to subscribe, and to stay on top of what the Texans are doing. But we will see everybody next week on the Born on the Bayou Sports Podcast.